Aloha family, today's episode is brought to you by Archon Mounts. They are the mounting solutions for those of you that are content creators, whether you are on TikTok, maybe you are one of those guys on YouTube, you do YouTube shorts, maybe you're on Twitter, now known as X, or maybe you're one of those guys that continues to use Snapchat. They have some really interesting ad campaigns lately. I totally don't get it, but hey, if that's you. Also, if you're someone that does professional photography, maybe you do audio spaces, maybe you're a podcaster, they have every professional mounting solution that you could ever think of. Everything from Baker mounts for DSLR cameras, you name it. They've got it. Go to archon.com. Be sure to at checkout to put in Hawai'i for 20% off your entire order. That's Archon Mounts at archon.com, keeping your devices within reach. We also want to announce that our new merch is up. If you go to therealgilo.com, click on merchandise, we have our new line of t-shirts that came out, Blessed Beyond Measure. We also have some really cool concept shirts of En Hakor, and also there's some pickleball paddles. That's right. If you're one of those guys, if you're a pickleball champion, we have our newest pickleball set, which is called Aole Pilikia, and which really means no fear. And if you go to therealgilo.com, all the links are in the bio, and go to our store merchandise and you'll see it all. So thank you for your support, fam. We just appreciate you. We have a very special treat for those of you that are listening today. We are doing this live, our conversation live on Twitter, now known as X. And we're sharing this with you. And for those of you that don't know how this works in the live format, my wife and I, or whoever speaks, we just kind of go with the flow. We have a list of points and things we want to share. And today's episode, we're going to talk about fighting for your marriage. This is part 3. It's an ongoing series. And today we're going to focus a little bit on how to save your marriage. And now that doesn't mean if you've failed or if you're in a divorce. It doesn't matter if you're married. And if you're single, it'll be a cheat code for those of you that are single. But maybe you're going through a very good time in your marriage, or maybe you're struggling. Well, that's why we're doing this. We want to share some things that we've learned along the way. My wife and I have been together for 25 years. We've got 4 children here on planet Earth. We have 3 cute little babies up in heaven, and we're just blessed to be able to share everything we've learned along the way. We are also pastors of Lighthouse Church in Honolulu, Hawaii, and we've got a lot of things that we do that God bless us with. So we're going to get started. We'll be back in about 29 seconds. Get your notepad ready, or if you're on our Twitter X Spaces, get your questions ready or comments or things you want to share. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
Like this, it's a brand new day. Hey, wake up every morning and say it's a brand new day. Hey, take a good day, make it great, okay? 'Cause if you got some lemons, make some lemonade. Yeah, chase those clouds away. It's a brand new day. Hey, it's a brand new day. It's a brand new day. Okay.
Man, I'm sweating. Are you sweating, honey?
Yeah. It's hot.
And plus we close our window, and summer's coming. So, and plus I'm drinking my cappuccino.
That could be why.
Huh?
That could be why.
Could be why. Then we were rushing. I was rushing my wife to hurry up, honey. And she took a quick shower. And for those of you that are joining us, what the heck? Somehow we miss out all our grammar. Like, I don't know what it is. But anyways, thank you for joining us. Those of you on the outside, quote unquote, other listeners, our replay listeners, we're going to talk about fighting for your marriage. And there's a whole lot of things that when it comes to marriage that I think in today's popular culture, it's changed over the years. I think for me and my wife, like the way my parents were married, it was extremely loyal, extremely like my dad served my mom, like he totally served my mom and did everything for her. And she did everything for him in different ways. And today it seems different. And I'm going to lead off with this. I noticed, and this is by no means judging anybody that does this, because I'm sure we all have different reasons and whatnot. But my wife and I have never had separate accounts, for example. We've never had separate bank accounts. We've always had a joint bank account. There are times I wish I did have a separate bank account because it's hard to buy.
Same.
Yeah, it's hard to buy presents. You know, when my wife is like, "What is this charge?" or "What is this?" or yeah.
My parents never had separate bank accounts. So I think that eliminates to some it eliminates deception, number one, because it helps keep you accountable. Number two, it helps you in your marriage where you have to communicate, right, when it comes to finances. I think I don't know the numbers, but I think one of the biggest issues in divorce is finances.
Yeah, it's one of the top three.
Yeah.
So what's the other one?
Infidelity. I don't know.
It's always children, right? Usually children and finances. Those are the top two. I don't know what the third one is, but
Really? Why children?
it's always about the raising of children because of the way we were brought up, right? So for fam, we're gonna to lay out the foundation for everybody joining today. We're gonna talk about how to fight for your marriage, but just so you know who we are pastors, so we do have a very heavy biblical scripture response to everything. That is by no means casting judgment on anybody that comes in here, but we do invite you to sit down with us and have, like, you're at our dinner table today, and we're going to share with you our heart and how God has blessed us. We've been together 25 years. We've been through some stuff, and I think laying out that foundation, we want to just say that out right in the very beginning, so there's no misunderstanding where we are positioned and where we come from. So yeah, finances and children, because there's a scripture that in the Bible states that when a man leaves his mother and father.
That's the scripture I was going to lead off with.
Yeah, so go ahead, you share it since you're going to lead off with it, and we'll talk about that with the finances and kids.
Okay, so Genesis 2, verses 22 to 24 says, "Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib of man," or Adam, and he brought her to the man. The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. So she shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united with his wife, and they will become one flesh." And I want to say, I was thinking about this scripture earlier, and God put Adam to sleep to take her out, to take a rib out, and he made her, out of his rib. I thought that was very interesting because God could have done the same thing, making her out of the ground, just like how he made Adam, but he made her out of Adam. And when they talk about bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, now you are one, right? When you're married, this is his wife, and they become one flesh. Now you do things together, right? And when it says a man will leave his father and mother, it's not saying, "Oh, I'll go leave my parents and then I never gonna come back." That's not what it's saying. It's now you've become your own household or your own family together, and now you create your own family. And in creating your own family, right, there are things that you bring along the way. For example, the way that we've grown up, you bring all those things with you. But the becoming one is the challenge in the marriage, and with finances, and when kids come along, you have to make the decision in how you guys are going to parent together, how you're going to do finances together, and there has to be communication on that part. Now, if your parents get involved with your parenting, right, then that becomes a problem, right? Because now your parents is trying to tell you how to parent your own kids. Now, I can see if there's something going on that raises a red flag, that your parent says, "Hey, something's going on here," because of something they see. But you can't just, I know parents who make up stuff just because, they want to control the grandkids, or they want to still be the biggest voice in their son's life or their daughter's life. Or, I mean, I've walked it out even with my own family, and I just trip. I mean, I would trip out when my grandma would call, and my dad was close to my nana, but and I've watched my parents fight over that, because now
let's distinguish that real quick before you. So what my wife is sharing, for those that are listening, and I see you, Dr. John, thank you for being in here, and there's a lot of cultural differences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like I'm Hawaiian, Chinese, Filipino. So not that I don't like using the word Asian, but a lot of cultures in Hawaii have that, right? Where they're so involved. Culture is one thing, but also the way that we live and where we live. That is important to know that out, because we're on an island.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you're surrounded by your family, but you have to have a standard too, where you don't, you love your parents, but then, hey, these are my kids.
But
this is my family.
One of the trade-offs, though, right, was we always had a good date night. Yeah, we always had a babysitter. So, yeah,
I'm all for family. It's just there needs to be boundaries, and that's where problems come in when the husband doesn't set up boundaries, or the wife doesn't set up boundaries. Within their family. Like, my family knows with me, it's like, I've watched my parents live their life, right? And so we're talking about cultural things and what you bring it into your marriage, and what do you want to bring into your marriage, or how do you want to raise your own children? And a lot of things that I grew up with, I never wanted to what do you call it? Bring into training up our own kids, right? And so there's learned behavior in that, and you got to unlearn some of those things, and you got to be adamant about it. Like, in my family, I've never been hugged and told I love you. That wasn't a common thread or a common thing with my parents. You should know that they love you, because they take care of you and all those other things. But with who I am and my design, I am a very physical person. If you ask my husband, I'm very physical. So there are times where I need a hug. That's part of one of my love languages is that, and learning from how I grew up and taking what is good and applying it to our lives, and what is bad we push off. But even in pushing off, you have to recognize it, number one, and number two, you got to deal with it, right? And so when we had our daughter, our oldest daughter, one of the things that I did was I hugged her a lot. And that was challenging for me. And I did it so much because it was so uncomfortable until I got to the place where it was comfortable for me. Because that would be, for me, that was a way to love her well. Because I knew that she needed it, and it was uncomfortable for me. And to step into that, because I knew, even though it was uncomfortable, it is something that I didn't have. I knew that that's what she needed, and I didn't what do you call it, like sweep it on the rug and make like it's not that big of a deal, and don't hug, and
let me add context to that, family. And as soon as we're kind of laying out this part, we do want to open the floor. Obviously, we got some amazing people in here, but when we talk about our first daughter, for those of you that don't know, my wife had a surgery many years ago with the physician, after the surgery, after the post-op and all that stuff, whatever. I don't know the fancy terminology, but we sat in his office. And I remember his face. I remember what he looks like. I remember what he said. And he said that at the end of our conversation, I totally understand. I'm not disrespecting any medical professionals today, but because of the type of surgery she had and the severity of the statistics that he mentioned, he said that you guys will never have children again, or actually ever. You're not able to conceive. And then he threw out a number.
99.9% chance of never having kids.
Family. He literally said 99.9%. And to this day, I understand why he said 99.9%, because he's not God.
It's that 1%.
And that 1% was all God needed.
Yep.
That's all God needed. And so we adopted our first child. This is the one we always talk about. For those of you that know, we have 1, 2, 3. We had 6 more after that. 3 are in heaven, which didn't come to completion on this earth. But anyway, so the first, I'm taking a long time to explain this point. Our first daughter, my wife fostered her, and we ended up adopting her. She is a bloodline to her. But she was so abused in such horrific ways that I wouldn't even think of any of those things to be put on an adult. And I'm not going to go into detail. I think we're in a place in 2024 where we can use our imagination. There are things done to her that I would be incarcerated for life on 10 life sentences if you knew what was done to her as a baby. And so all that going, now that I built up the emotional bucket for you guys, she did not know what it was to be truly loved. And so when my wife got her, man, what a great bridge of understanding. Because I'm not a hugger either, but through my wife and through her loving her first daughter, our first daughter, God opened up some amazing bridges for me and for my wife in that area. So
no, mind you, I didn't want to. It's funny. Culturally, the things are different, right? Culturally, in our culture, it is to have a boy first is something that is desired, is prominent, is something that our family is saying, hey, you got to have a boy, right? Not necessarily a boy first, but to have a boy because the boys carry on the name. And that has always been a big thing for my family. But for me, because of the way I grew up, I never wanted to have a girl. And I had made up my mind to never have girls. I only going to have boys. That's what I said. You know what? I never going to have one girl. I only going to have one boy.
Because, you know, it's funny, family. I said I will never have boys because I'm not going to have my sons drop their ding ding on the toilet. Oh my God, there's no way. And it's so funny how God gave us 2 boys and 2 girls here on this earth. I mean, that's just the funniest thing ever.
But she was a lesson for me that through all the trauma, through all the things that I've been through, that I have, you have the ability to love no matter what. You can love a girl, you can love a boy. It's the perception in my mind because of the trauma. And the same thing even with marriage, it's the perception in your mind and how you view marriage, right? And statistics would say otherwise, right? When you come from a broken home. So my nana, my dad's mom, she became a single mom. She was divorced. So was my grandma. My grandma was divorced twice.
Both of our families have, like, my grandmother had 7 children from 4 different men. So generationally, we talked about that actually with Dr. Heath and Dr. John yesterday in our spaces, where there are just generational things, even psychologically, right, that already puts you at a deficit even before we got married. Right. And the funny thing is, both of our families, before me and my wife, now my mom and dad are an exception because they kind of broke the cycle for me.
My mom was is divorced, right? So I have half siblings and then I have step siblings. But my dad was my mom's second marriage. My mom was my dad's only marriage, and they stayed married until my dad passed away. And they were married for 25 years, I think.
So your
No,
mom,
29 years.
your mom broke the cycle, right? I guess we can say it that way. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's funny because my wife and I have a very, for those jumping in, we're going to open up the floor and just after this, maybe about a minute or two. My wife and I, we are total opposite sides of the spectrum. Bah, I'm telling you, if we was in high school right now, we would I would be getting lickings from her, or I would be like, making trouble to her and running away. That's the kind of person I was. But we are two totally opposite people. I'm not saying that I'm a goody two shoes or anything, but I wasn't exposed. Okay, let me rephrase that. I think we had the same exposures. Because we both grew up in Hawaii and those times were the same, right? But the parenting, however, was different. I think that's the difference. Yeah.
So you learn a lot from watching your parents, right? There's this saying which irritates me, but I was always told this as a kid. Children ought to be seen and not heard. And I'm thinking, what the heck does that mean? Right? I mean, we were always told that when we were kids. And don't do as I do. Do as I say. But that doesn't work. You don't do as your parents say. You follow. You do as they do. Right? That's learned behavior. What you see growing up, what you think is normal. So when I met my husband, I was like, God, are you sure? Are you sure this is the guy? Because
I was sexy.
He is so. His family is so opposite of my family. So it was kind of hard for me because I was like, wow, I don't know if I like meet my family.
Her family was interesting, I will say. And it's funny because to this day, man, I love them because they carry on these traditions that are gone today. That whole idea of if someone in the family loses a job or doesn't have, or maybe there's a death, bro, I'm telling you, everybody comes together. Mm-hmm. They don't even. There's no sign up sheet. There's no
question.
There's no Facebook post. Hey family, let's go help. No, it's like, what time you gonna be there? I'll meet you there. So that's kind of brief. We didn't really cover everything on the beginning of, but before we open up the floor, I will say that one of the things for our marriage when we first started was we kind of already started at a place that I don't think we both envisioned we would start from. I mean, it's not a fairy tale wedding. Now, the wedding was beautiful, but I'm talking about because there are things that we did prior to our marriage that were not holy, right? I think we all do, just generally speaking. And of course, we had a daughter already, which she was foster at the time, yeah.
Right, because we
adopted her.
The process of adoption took a while, which was, I feel like that was a God thing. It took a while because then I would have adopted her by myself, and then when we got married, then my husband would have adopted her afterwards because you would have to go through the whole name change and everything, and there was just a whole process working with the state system that we worked in. So it really worked out because it was after we got married. I want to say it was that year that we got married. Yeah. The year that we got married, maybe like 6 months later, we were able to adopt her as our own.
Yeah. And I remember that moment in a courtroom. Mm-hmm. It was a very small session, small courtroom. It was only like probably 20 people at the most. Mm-hmm. And I remember the judge asking I still remember it. Man, it's crazy. Like that's like 20, 15. I can't do the math, but 15. What is 15 minus? whatever it was. She was like 5. Yeah, she was 5.
She was 4, I think.
No, I think she was 5. Let's just
No,
say
this was prior to going to kindergarten. So just before. So this was in May. So maybe it was almost a year later, I want to say,
Yeah.
because it was in May. We got married in July.
so. When the judge asked her, do you? Oh, this is crazy. I'm getting emotional just going back that far back, man. So when the judge asked, do you? What was the question? I can't remember. Do you want?
Why do you want to adopt her?
No,
That's what
not
she said.
us. He asked, because he had to get Jasmine's confirmation. And remember, she said yes.
Oh, I don't remember.
You don't remember that?
No, because she's. I don't know if he asked her that
Did I just create that memory in my mind?
because she's too young. She can't answer the court in that way.
Really?
Only if they're of age, and there's a
Okay,
a
so
year that they allow
I
kids.
created that memory in my mind, and I
She
carried it.
asked me.
She asked you.
Yeah, and then she asked me why did we want to adopt her. I said because we love her.
Oh, okay, I remember that. You see how old I am, family? I'm gonna be 50, bro. I'm gonna be 50 pretty soon. But hey, you know what? I don't care. That's a special memory, regardless of how it. But it's so funny. Well, family, let's open up the floor. If anybody wants to come up and share, there's no agenda. We're just talking. You know, like I said, we're at our dinner table. We're gonna go to our living room in just a second, but we're just hanging out, talking, so sharing our heart. But if anyone wants to come up and share something, I don't know if you've got a question. That's fine too. And I'm just grateful that you're here. We're glad that you're hanging out with us. We're going to get into some meat and potatoes. We're just kind of being light conversation right now, but there are some things we are going to cover. And one of the things I will say that I'm very, very, I can confirm beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm with the right woman. And there's a passage that I'll share with you, and it's it comes out of Proverbs. And whether you read the Bible or not, it's good reading material. Let's just all agree that it's good reading material. You can take bits and pieces if you want. But in Proverbs 18:22, it says that he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. And I will tell you this much, family, bro, I'm telling you, favor and blessed beyond measure. I will say, after 25 years having children, and we've operated several businesses throughout the years. I've had many jobs throughout the years. We pastored a church together. We started in Kailua, Oahu. For those of you that don't know where that is, that's the town that Obama vacations every year. He actually just bought a place actually out there, and so that's where we started our pastoral journey. That's where we started our drug and alcohol rehab journey, in terms of counseling services and those things. So
It's just different seasons that you walk,
Yeah.
through life. Like, I mean, when we're talking about from the beginning and becoming one, when you become one, right? And we talked about your foundation of, what are you building in your foundation from the beginning, right? You bringing in all these, you're both bringing in your own struggles, issues, good things, whatever, like how we just talked about my nana and my dad, and my thought processes on having a girl, or and your thought processes on having a boy. Now there's a conforming to one. Not It's an agreement that we're coming, right? The Bible says, how can two walk together unless they're agreed?
mhm.
Right? And agreeing makes a big difference with children, with finances, with, like we were talking about, ministry, business, life circumstances, seasons of life, right? There has to be an agreement, but there has to be communication in those agreements, and you can't just assume or think something that's there that's not. And so it's always good to get confirmation.
So in the area of being one,
Mhm.
this is a very personal question. How did you feel you and I being one in the very beginning of our marriage? Let's say the first 5 years.
That was hard because we wasn't one.
Explain.
Because your mom would always get involved in everything that we did. And it was always an argument, and there was always an argument about Jasmine, and if like I didn't parent her right, or I didn't feed her right, or she would get mad at me if I was to put Jasmine to bed at 8:30 because I gotta go work at 11 because I worked. I've worked at the hospital, so my shift was 11 to 7, and I needed to put her to bed. She had school, so I don't know. And I think there was this not understanding or thinking that I was trying to put her to bed before they came home because I didn't want her to see them. Or, I mean, we tried waiting for them, but she was so small and she was tired. But some of those arguments.
Well, it was hard because we live with them too. That didn't help.
Mm-hmm.
So for family, for those of you that don't, the first year of our marriage,
Mm-hmm.
the first year of our marriage, my parents, I don't even know the word. Anyways, they offered us a place to stay with them. And I think 1 year later, we bought the house.
Right, because prior to getting married, I was living with my grandmother because my grandma had Alzheimer's, and I took care of my grandma. I want to say for 5 years, I took care of my grandma who had Alzheimer's. So I lived with my grandma. I cared for my grandma. I also worked. I worked 2 jobs, and then I ended up working at Castle Hospital out in Kailua, and I permanently stayed there until I left.
I don't think it helped the fact that all the money we spent on a wedding too. Well, so anybody that, if you want the dream place to get married, obviously it's Hawaii. Now you got to be from Hawaii to make it work. I mean, one of the blessings about being on an island is that when you have any event, nobody has an excuse. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say, oh, it's too far. Bro, you live on an island. What are you talking about too far? So we had to cut down our wedding list quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, because my dad has 14. My dad is a sibling of 14. My mom has a sibling of 7. But I come from a big family. My grandma had 12 siblings. And just Hawaii in general, when you deal with Hawaiian families, they're always big families. My dad had 14 siblings because my nana they
didn't have TV back then.
Well, my nana got divorced from my grandpa. My grandpa had more kids. So
that was a joke, man. My wife is trying to be all. This is funny because my wife is always joking, and I'm the one always serious. Today, I'm the one joking, and yeah. So yeah, they basically didn't have TV. If you got 14 kids, I mean, come on. They didn't have. Okay, put it this way: they didn't have Netflix.
They just believed in big families.
True. So I'm sorry to go so sideways, right? But the point being that having a wedding where we got married, it was beautiful, but it also was beautiful in price tag too. So the whole, going back to my mom, man, I love my mom, but me and my mom would fight and argue because we're of the same fabric. Me and my dad too, but she's passed away now. She's in heaven. She's been gone since 2014. So a lot of times my mom would, if she would try to keep me away from the conversations between you and her. She would try, but there are some times where she would talk to me as, Greg, and she'd always tell me that things that she doesn't agree with. And it was hard for me because that's my mom. And yeah, my wife is my love, and she's my wife. But it is one of those weird things. So if there's any moms that are going to be listening, let me tell you this much: love your sons, but for the love of God, please release them, because it makes it
right.
It makes it hard. Because I'll tell you a funny story, fam, and then we'll kind of reset a little bit. Because of my mom, I grew up eating her food. Did that ever affect you? The fact that I had to transition. This is a weird question, and maybe it doesn't make sense, but
No, it annoyed me because when we moved out, okay, so when we moved out, right, we bought our first house. One day he said to me, he goes, "Huh, my mom makes this better." I'm like, "Well, go."
no, I didn't say she makes
no,
it go.
no, that's what you said. You said, "Well, my mom makes this, but my mom's ones taste better." I said, "Well,
No, I
then
didn't
go to your mom's
Honey,
house and go get it from your mom."
I never said she makes it better. No, I
was like,
didn't.
"What?"
No, I said she makes it this way.
That's not what you said.
You know what? We have 2 clinical psychologists in this room, so
My mom's one
I may pay for services. No, I never. Okay, well, let's just say I did say that.
But I said, you know what? Whatever. Go to your mom's house and eat them. Then.
And we would go to their house a lot to go eat. So yeah, that did make it hard living at home with my parents, living home with them. And even it didn't matter actually if we didn't live with them because it continued for a very long time. Yeah.
But then there was no boundaries either. So they would come to our house. They would show up unannounced.
Well, we would show up unannounced too.
We would call first.
Not all the time. Not me.
Well, you, maybe because that's your parents. But even when we went to my nana's house, we never just went over there. Like my nana knew when we were coming over. So that was something different. For me, we've never gone over to my grandparents' house and them not know that we were coming.
I'm gonna pause for a second. This is fun, by the way. Family, I'm looking at my wife. So we our office set up. I have a desk right in front of me. Well, obviously I got a desk in front. I have my computer, all my gear in front of me, and then my wife's desk is literally back to mine. So if we ever want to like flirt, all I got to do is move my head away from the computer screen. I can look. So right now she's got her mic and headset. I'm looking straight at it. But this is fun. I'm enjoying this. So with my mom is a very strong-willed person. She's a leader. She's a pastor. She was a business owner. Very strong. Now, her opinion mattered. Right? That's my mom. Right? Her opinion matters, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And my opinion mattered too. And so we would have these standoffs for hours, right? But it did. And looking back, I'll say this. So for those that heard my wife talk about boundaries, I take full responsibility for that because there are going to be people that challenge your boundaries, right? Outside of your marriage. And now that I'm 48 years old, I look back at that. And this is not a negative. This is not like, oh, I feel like a junk husband. But if I was to give advice to any man or any person, it's going to be the husband and the leader of your home. You take that responsibility and you be the one to enforce those boundaries. Don't leave it to your wife to struggle against those boundaries or even your children. You set those boundaries and you define what those are. Because now I look back, I could have saved quite a bit of heartache and arguments, and if I had just said, no, Mom, listen, you come to me, this is you and my wife, no, you guys don't know, this is our house, this is what we do. And so I do take responsibility, and I'm looking at my wife and I'm repenting right now.
I want to say this too, that there are many times she said to me just different things, and looking back now, like if your mom is one of those moms, right, set up boundaries, but also help her to understand that you're not leaving her and that you're not walking away from her, but that you're building a life together with your wife, and it doesn't mean that you're leaving her out.
I think some of that, now that we're parents, it's very important as fathers, as mothers, to teach your children what a healthy relationship looks like. And I'm no clinician, but I've got some years of experience of making a lot of mistakes and learning from them. Teaching your children what a healthy relationship looks like. And I'm not, like, my mom never really sat down with me and said, hey, this is how you treat a girl. My dad did. But I looking back, I'm like, if my mom had taught me some things, I think that would have, if she said, hey, this is how you treat a girl, this, and just teach me those basic things. And I think that would have made a huge difference in the way that because although I was married to you, I still looked at my mom
Mm.
for that. This sounds weird, and I don't know if this is the right emotion to, but I still felt connected to her.
Mhm.
Her cooking was good. I didn't know how to transition from her food, which really is not about the food. It's really not. It's that comfort that I got. Because growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. When I was a kid,
You trained our kids so much to say that that they're gonna regurgitate this. So my dad, he said growing up he never had that much money. So
yeah, it's a joke, fam. But so my mom would find ways to create these dishes, these meals that were so good. Like my mom could take a $2 pack of hamburger and turn it into the most epic meal ever. It's crazy, right? So when I got married, it's not that I was expecting my wife to do that. I had to learn and develop a new system of comfort with my wife.
well, it's expectation, right? What do you expect when you're married? Are you expecting your your wife to reproduce food like your mom,
The corn
Or-
chowder, hamburger and corn,
right?
show you
Just
chicken.
different aspects of your marriage, and it's learning to become one, right? And that's the biggest thing, is learning to become one, because the separation between you and your mom was hard. It was a hard separation because both didn't know how to transition and both didn't have boundaries.
So here's, and I hope this is going to be a good conversation, but my mom was such a woman of excellence. Her and my dad, prior to them going full time into ministry in the church, they were both in the corporate. My mom managed a medical office, and so she did all the business and the business dealings of a physician. So she ran the office. She did all. So she was very good in that. This is in the 80s. So, and my dad was actually in a corporate role. My dad was vice president of a bank in Hawaii, First Hawaiian Bank. And he also managed other banks throughout his career. So the trajectory of us would have been, I always joke about it. I said, Dad, man, you would have been a multi-millionaire if you kept on that same path. It's not to say we didn't have money. I joke about that. But my mom was always someone of excellence. When something needed to get done, she would do it. And she did it well. And so I know it was hard for her to see her son. And it's not that I wasn't doing good or bad. I think as a parent, sometimes we're scared to let our kids go and fall and trip. I'm not right now. Like, now that my wife is so funny. My wife is like, we don't get into arguments, but I kind of like, honey, just let them go. So going to the parenting part, when we talk about one of the biggest separators or the wedges in a marriage is the rearing of children. That's one. And it's not necessarily that we don't want to work together. It's how we've been brought up.
Yep.
Yeah. And putting those two together.
You know, part of that too is the way that I was raised and the way that I grew up. So, and you see your own personality in your kids. You see some things in your kids that you know that, hey, this is what you brought to the table.
So we joke about with our kids, right? We say, you know what? Don't even try it. Between your mother and me, we have over 80 years of experience, and
Okay, so let's get back to, besides the kids, let's get back to your mom and you. And transitioning, and one of the biggest things the biggest thing really that kept us together was not just the Lord, but praying over the situations, or every situation that we were in. Psalms 25, verses 4 and 5 say, "Show me your ways, O Lord, teach me your paths, guide me in your truth, and teach me, for you are God, my Savior, and my hope is in you all day long." And in dealing with your mom, it was hard places. There are hard places. And I remember when we would argue when we were first married. I want to say within our first year of marriage, it was such a struggle because she just, I don't know what she wanted to. I felt like she wanted to control everything, and we would argue so much that one day I just say, you know what, I'm done. Like, either we move out or we should just get a divorce, because it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know if you remember that, but we were arguing about that. We've argued so much within such a short period of time that I am a physical person. I am not one who has eloquent speech or have a lot of words. Like, when I'm done, I'm done. Just,
I don't remember the divorce part. I do remember the arguing part for sure. My mom's not here. I don't know if she would agree to the controlling. I don't know. I don't know if that. I know it was hard for her. That part I know. The controlling, I don't know, because that's more of a character issue. I don't know about, but I do know that it was hard for her. I remember when my brother went to college, she had a hard time with that. And yeah, hon, because as a mother, when you release your child to go to college, you remember we cried. We were in Boston, right? So I think that the whole aspect of my mom being so involved, it did put a wedge from the very get-go in our marriage. And maybe not wedge, but it made it very, very hard for me to truly be one with you. I don't think it had anything to do with desire. I think it had everything to do with just there's environmental things, right? Just being in the home for one, and then of course the upbringing, how we were brought up, right? But going back to what I said, the boundary has to be defined, and I have to be, as the husband, as the father, I have to be the one saying, no, this is where it is, right?
so if you have a husband who's stubborn, or you have a wife who's stubborn, right, and you're in a hard place, what do you do? Right? And that's where the scripture comes in. Lord, show me your ways. How do I pray for my spouse?
Yeah.
What do I say? How can we transition from this place to another place? Because regardless of where you live, right, whether you live with your in-laws for a short period of time and that causes problems, and then you move out, you're still going to have the same problems if you don't deal with the issues. Because when we transitioned out of the home, we still kind of had the same problems because there still wasn't any boundaries. So how do we deal with that? I've never disrespected my mother-in-law. I've never disrespected my in-laws at all. I know of people who disrespect, their in-laws for however, on both ends, whether it's the spouse who sets up boundaries, and allows their parents to disrespect their spouse, or the spouse disrespects the parents because of whether or not, they were mistreated or whatever. I've never disrespected my in-laws at all. I feel like part of growing up in the environment that I did, just kind of, I feel like it kind of prepped me for where I was at. But the difference is I could recognize things, and I knew how to pray and ask God to help. Right. So if you have a spouse who really loves their parents, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing for you to love your parent, but it is a bad thing when your parents come before your spouse, and that shouldn't be happening, especially when you're married, because like I said in Genesis, it talks about you become one flesh, and you go and you prepare a place for you and your family, right? And the becoming one is transitioning from being in one household to creating your own household. And then, as you two become one, you figure out this is how we want to do things. And then when you have kids, that's a whole not a whole.
So what do you do when those boundaries are continually crossed and the husband, like in my situation, yeah, what do you do? That's a tough thing. What if the husband is in, the only word I can think of is, for me, is that I guess I can say, looking back, and I'm just based upon what I remember, is that I put myself first.
Mm.
And it sounds like a bad thing, but I put myself first because it's harder to love my wife, to be 100%, hey, this is our family. It was harder because of the relationship with my mom. So rather than, I obviously couldn't pick my mom relationship wise. I mean,
I remember us arguing because you would say to me that you're putting me in the middle. I'm stuck in the middle, and they said, I'm not putting you in the middle. I'm not asking you to be in the middle of me and your mom. What I'm asking you to do is put boundaries around our family.
I put myself in the middle, right? I put myself in because it was a middle ground. So there's a quote that I've said before where the pain of regret far outweighs the pain of discipline. Let me say that again because I think I butchered it. The pain of regret will always outweigh the pain of discipline. And that is so true. If I had put my head down and said, no, I'm going to fight for my marriage. This is what it's going to be. This is the boundaries, but do it in a loving way. That was harder for me, at least I felt, than to be in the middle. But the truth is, I could have saved a lot of heartache had I made that decision. So, no, this is the boundaries, Mom. I love you, Mom, but this is my wife. This is my life. And there's no separation, right? You're still my mother, but she's my wife, and this is our life. And I don't know if I felt like I could have done that or couldn't. It was just, I don't know. I've never been married before. So there's no manual that teaches, hey, this is how you separate from your parents. Like, nobody teaches.
When we would have those arguments, I think I just stopped arguing about it. And then I started praying and just asking God to create the boundaries that we needed.
Now, when did we start doing marriage conferences? Or was it early on? It wasn't later in life. It was pretty early on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the reason why I'm bringing this up, family, is that my dad, before we got married, my wife and I were stressing out about our wedding because it was getting very expensive. And my dad married us. I'll share the photos in a purple pill if I can find it. But my dad said, look, I understand you guys want a beautiful wedding. And my father-in-law had passed already. He wasn't around. So it was a very special thing for my wife to have a beautiful wedding. And it was for me, but I didn't understand it. As a man, as a husband, I don't know if we'll ever truly understand it the way a woman does.
Yeah. So when my dad passed away, I was 18, 19 when my dad passed away. But my family committed to taking care of me. Because I am the youngest. I'm the youngest grandchild, and I am the youngest child.
So in this wedding, with all of the preparation, her family stepping in, my dad said, I understand that you're spending a lot of money for this wedding, so don't get stressed out about it. You know, we've got support and family helping. He says, but I want to encourage you to invest more in your marriage
Mhm.
than what you're investing into your wedding. And that is something that has stuck me all these years. And my dad's been a great model. Although my mom passed away, my dad was faithful and loyal to the very end. They were together 47 years. My wife and I getting to the halfway point. So going back to we started going to these marriage conferences.
Mhm. Well, because I was listening to the fish. I would always listen to the fish, but
I'm going to share that in the chat. So if anybody wants, this is one of the courses that we take even to this day. And it's by Victor Marks, him and his wife, Eileen. Powerful course. We're not finished yet. We're not finished, right?
yeah, we have one more.
So I'll share it and you guys can look at it.
So how we started going to marriage conferences was they had this Valentine's Day special.
Oh, yeah.
And I love prime rib. It's my favorite thing to eat.
They trick you with the prime rib.
So Valentine's Day, they had this prime rib dinner for $50 for a spouse if you went to this Valentine's Day dinner and then you came back the next day. And I don't know if you guys know who Stephen Curtis Chapman is, but I loved his music. And so we went because of that, not realizing it was like a marriage conference thing.
It was cool because I know we're talking about a lot of things, but going to marriage conferences every year is the best investment we ever made in our marriage. And we missed a few because of being here, but and on top of that, we get to meet some amazing. We met the guys who made the movie Fireproof,
War Room,
Stephen Curtis Chapman, Clay and Renee Cross. We met them, and so how these conferences work, these marriage conferences work. There is about 500 couples, I think, close to 500 couples attend every year. Can you imagine a family 500 couples?
And you do a dinner, they have music, the music serenades you, you take pictures.
And they have breakout sessions, right? So that's where I learned a lot of my, if we do a conference or we do a meetup or training session, anything, we learn it from going to these conferences because they, General Assembly, you have keynote speakers, you have a dinner, and then they have breakout sessions where the men go one way and the women go another way. And that investment,
it's powerful. You got to turn off your phones. You can't record any sessions, and you have to be basically in the room. Like your mind can't be wandering anywhere, right? So you are present in the present, and you talk about everything, all the things that people don't are shamed to talk about.
And it was cool because in these conferences that we attend, there are couples that I've met a few that they've been married for like 50, 60. One was like 70. They've been married 70 years.
And they always attend.
It's crazy. So if I was to give a takeaway for you guys' family is, doesn't matter if in your marriage, if you're married and struggling or if you're married and thriving, man, always seek ways to invest into your marriage.
And attending one of these marriage conferences is always good. And keep an open mind when you go to these conferences, because these conferences can help save your marriage, right? The other thing is, if you're not a believer, if you want to stay married and you don't have any hope, I'm telling you, Jesus is the way.
Yeah. And I don't think we say that enough here on social media, on Spaces. We talk a lot.
This is the way.
A lot of people talk about God, and the scary thing is that God, a lot of, well, we won't get into religious discussion on the other side, but a lot of people, when they say God, it makes me wonder if it's a capital G or a small G, but, so the investment of our marriage was so key, because there were times when I didn't really want to go, but I knew that, hey, I still got to make that investment. And let me just pause for a second and just recognize the room. Thank you for everybody that's here, and those that came in and out, and those that are going to be listening on replay, we thank you. We are recording live for Spotify and Apple Podcasts and YouTube Podcasts. So we're just hanging out, just talking, sharing some not best practices, but life experiences and things that my wife and I have been through, some investments in our marriage. We also want to invite anybody that does have questions or comments. Purple pill on the bottom. Press mic if you want to. You don't have to. No pressure. We're enjoying this because I'm looking at the most beautiful woman on the planet right now. We're just talking. So I want to go into this part, and I have some notes here. It really is. Let's go to the second chapter. I don't know if there's chapters to our marriage, but when my mom passed, that's a good chapter, I think, to cover.
See, and no matter the arguments that we had or whatever, like I said, I never disrespected my in-laws at all. And my husband had asked me to take care of his mom when she got sick. And so when she got sick, she passed away when Gideon was a baby. And so when she got sick,
So Gideon is our youngest son, by the way, for those that don't know.
Gideon was still a baby. He was about 1. So I would go pick up my kids from school, come back to his parents' house because they lived about a block and a half away from us. You know, and at that time, his Auntie Florence, who's his grandma's sister, was living with them. So I would take care of Auntie Florence and then take care of my mother-in-law and then, you know, do whatever I needed to do with my kids, set them up to do their schoolwork or whatever, take care of Gideon and do all that stuff until, you know, my father-in-law came home, and then, you know, we would go back home and stuff. But throughout the time that she was sick, I did take care of her. And like I said, you know, I'll get calls in the middle of the night. Then I would go by myself to the house to go and take care of her, to go and take care of Auntie Florence. And then I would come back to the house. And then, you know, in the morning, Greg would go to work. But that was a process in itself.
Was it hard? Was it hard for you?
That was hard. Kind of. I feel like, I don't know, I said it before, and I said the way that me and my siblings grew up, you know, my dad is a Vietnam vet, right? And my dad did have PTSD, and a lot of times we walked on eggshells around him. But it's like we were always in survival mode. So those things come back up when there's a stressful situation, and it's just, you just know what to do. I don't even know how to explain it.
You just did it.
Yeah, in a stressful situation, we just know what to do, because that's kind of how we grew up. So when my mother-in-law got sick and all these things were happening, right, and got to take care of my kids, my son is a baby, my husband got to go to work, got to take care of my mother-in-law, got to take care of Auntie Florence. It wasn't a
There's no question.
yeah, it wasn't a question. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not, it wasn't a big deal for me. And I love my grandma. You know, I took care of my grandma too. She was always good to me.
So for those that don't know the dynamic of, and I know it's not just Hawaiians, it's not just Polynesians or Puerto Ricans or,
but it's a culture that we have.
Yeah. And I know that these cultures exist all around the world, but if you've ever been to our home, that's just how, there's no question. When my brother got sick, there was no question. I was on a plane the next day. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Literally, not even it was less than 12 hours. I was on a plane flying out to Oregon to be with him in the hospital. There was no question. And I didn't have to worry about, trust me, my first thing was, is my family going to be okay when I'm gone? Number one, are the finances going to be handled? Number two, is my wife going to be okay? Number three, and I never forget, this is how crazy, bro, I'm telling you. My sister-in-law, I didn't like her at all. Oh my God.
We took care of her kids too, so we fostered
her kids for years. But you know what she told me, family, when I had to fly in that plane? I never forget. She said, You know, great, no worry, we got you. M's gonna be okay. You just go do what you gotta do. You know what's crazy, family, is that I literally was gonna punch out her husband, punch out a couple of his teeth.
Who wasn't her husband at the time?
Yeah, and but the whole dynamic is this: there's no question in our family when it comes to taking care of one another. Now, the reason why I asked my wife this question, was it hard? It wasn't about. I already knew that it wasn't hard for her to do that. What I really was getting at, honey, is that now that we're in our midway point of our life, our level of intimacy, family, let's just say, bro, my wife is hot, bro, I'm telling you. And so the level of intimacy now, if I could go back all those years and draw those boundaries and love my wife the way I love her now, oh my gosh, we would have like 15 babies by now. I'm just telling you straight up, you know. And that's where the wisdom that we have now, and we're still learning, right, is to be able to go back and just look, okay, I don't want to make those mistakes again.
Somebody had asked me, and they said, you know, the Bible says you cannot put your hand to the plow and look back, right? Because you don't belong to the kingdom of God if you do. And that simply means, like, let's not live in the past, right? And so somebody had asked me, if you could go back and do it again, would you? And I said, well, if I went back to my past, yeah, I'll do them the exact same way, because I wouldn't have, number one, I wouldn't have learned the lessons that I learned. Number two, I wouldn't have met my husband. Number three, you know, where I am in life now, I wouldn't be there. So why would I, you know, it's one thing to reflect and think, okay, I wish I would have made better decisions back then. But now that I know of this, I can teach my kids to not make the same mistakes that I've made. But it's never to go back and you know, that's regret, and can't live back there, right? It's not, you shouldn't be living in regret, because that's how you get stagnant. You don't move forward. You know, there's a lot of things that I regret happening in my past, but those are past, you know, those are choices that I made. But you know, the choices that I made lead me to this place where I am now. And I don't want to go back to a place where I feel like I don't need God, you know, because I do. And the only reason why I'm here and where I am now is because of him. I mean, even our marriage, the only reason why it is where it is because of him, because of the help that he gives us. And you know, the Bible is a good book of wisdom, right? It's full of wisdom for a lot of things, right? On how to love your wife or how to love your husband, you know, how to have hope, you know, hope in God, right? So if you look at Hebrews, I'm gonna just share some scriptures that talks about marriage, a husband and a wife, and honoring. And here in Hebrews 13:4, it says, marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and the sexually immoral. So if you are in a marriage, right, adultery should not be for you, right? You shouldn't be having sex with somebody other than your spouse, right? And if you're this, it says sexually immoral. What does that mean? If you're the other person, you shouldn't be having, you know, sex with somebody who's married. Like, get your own spouse, you know, find your own husband instead of trying to sleep with somebody else's husband. Like, seriously, that's way better than you thinking that it's better for you to, sleep with somebody who's married. Like, that doesn't even make sense. It says to keep the marriage bed pure, right? Like, no pornography, no things that would hinder your marriage. Like, be okay where you're at in your marriage. Have conversations, right? And having conversations is not really argument. So I had to look this up in Proverbs 21 verse 9. It talks about being a quarrelsome wife. It says better to live in a corner of a rooftop than with a quarrelsome wife. So I had to go look up what the heck quarrelsome. So to be in a quarrel means to have a heated argument or disagreement, typically about a trivial issue, and between people who are usually on good terms. So what is trivial? Of little value or importance. So why are you always arguing about things that are of little value or of importance versus, things that matter, right? So some things that are not of importance is
give me an example of things that you would argue with me about that are of little importance, or things that you would bring up. Yeah, give them an example.
I don't know, because I feel like I'm not a quarrelsome wife.
No, you're not. But there are, and every household has them. But there are some things that are just not worth pursuing an argument.
Right.
Just not worth it. Now, that's tough for me because I'm very solution oriented by nature, which means I like to have debates.
Quarrelsome husband.
So, but,
I'm not that one that wants to debate all the time. And if I feel like that you're not listening to me, I'm just gonna be quiet because I don't want to waste my breath. I've always been part of my personality is this. I like shortcuts. I like to get from point A to point B in a straight line. If you take me on a crooked road, it irritates me. But also, I'm not gonna, waste my breath on something that you want to argue about. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be my spouse, my sibling, whoever. I mean, I just feel like I waste my breath. And one of the things that I've learned to do, and it wasn't always this way, because I could cut people with my words. Sometimes stuff would come out of my mouth and I want to just grab it and put it back in, and it could never, do that. And I've really, really hurt people over the years. I know I've really hurt my husband with some of the stuff that would come out of my mouth when I would get upset. So that's why I've learned to become quiet and just to be quiet, so that those things don't come out of my mouth that could be detrimental to, number one, our marriage, and two, that would cut so deep that it's someplace that would be hard to come back from.
Well, the one thing that the words didn't really hurt me, really. The thing that hurts me the most with my wife in our past was if I ever felt that she didn't believe in me. That hurt. Now, there would be things that we would probably in a recent times where I would say, honey, why did you say that? You're the only person I allowed underneath my armor. Remember, I would say stuff like that. You're the only person. So, yeah, in that respect. But, and I heard my wife, I had to step out for a second, but my wife was talking about, I call it the Jezebel spirit, women that, one thing I will say as a word of caution to any men, men and husbands, is to be very cautious on, I call it wisdom. I forget the word I use, but be very mindful of where you spend your time with the opposite sex. Now, that doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that I don't trust someone. So, for example, my wife, in our church in Hawaii, there's, we have like a prayer team, right? And so my wife and one of our leaders at the time, who was a girl, if she was in the church, right, and nobody else was there, and I just happened to walk in and I had to go grab something, maybe go to the sanctuary, If she was in there, I would make it a point to not stay in there longer than necessary. I would get in and out, and I would actually find reasons to get out. And it's not that I didn't trust my wife's friend it's just that I did not want to put myself in a position.
And she did the same thing.
And she did the same thing too, right?
Like if she went to the house to go get something or to do something and she knew that I wasn't there, she would stay outside of the house and she would just drop something off and say, you know what, I'll just come back whenever. She would come back whenever I was there. And that, puts boundaries, not just boundaries, but it helps, you to set healthy boundaries, right? For if you're married, right, it sets healthy boundaries. You're honoring and respecting your spouse, right? And in the same way, when you are in a relationship, you want the same things. That same respect should be happening, right? Because if you say that you love somebody, then you actually show them that you love them, right? Not just by words, but through action, right? And that leads me to First Peter 7. Where did my scripture go?
Well, while you're waiting for it, Ephesians 5:33 talks about, however, let each one of you love your wife as yourself, right? And let the wife see that she respects her husband. So I'll read it in full context. However, let each one of you love your wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. And I think it's one of the hard things for a lot of men to love their wives as themselves. One indicator of a struggle of that is, and this may sound silly, but before we got married, I was so focused on things that I wanted, right? I wanted the race cars. My wife got so mad at me because one of the cars I had, it had racing seats in it. And she hated the fact that I put these racing seats in. I had this, I souped it up, and I put in so much money. Actually, this was after we were married. Let me take that back. We were married, yeah? And I was putting all this money into these cars, and just, I wanted to be a race car driver. And looking back on it, man, I could have invested that into our marriage or into my wife. So that scripture, which says, husbands, love your wives as you love yourself. That's an indicator for me. The other one is, and this is probably a very tough one in 2024. Does your wife have all of your passwords? Does she have all of your passcodes? Does she have access to all of your social media accounts? That includes DMs, that includes emails. Does she have access to everything? And if she doesn't, that may, and I'm not saying it is or isn't, but it may be an indicator that maybe you're not willing to give everything to your spouse. And that goes both ways, obviously, but I'm talking to the man, right? My wife has access to every email. She has access to every direct messages on Twitter, Facebook. She's got all my passwords. And a lot of times I get frustrated because it's the same password for every account. For some reason, we seem to forget our passwords. But the point is, fam, she has access to that.
Vice versa.
Yeah. And so going back to the whole stewardship of our marriage, like, I will not engage in a conversation with any female if it poses a threat to my marriage. And that includes just a simple frivolous conversation, or even if it appears to be flirtatious in nature, I will not continue that conversation. And any DM that I have, my wife has access to it. And if I feel that conversation gets a little bit too comfortable, then I'll stop. Because there are things that attack our marriage. And the Bible says that the enemy has no desire yet but to steal, kill, and destroy us. So that includes our marriage. And he seeks to devour everything that we have, anything that is good. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a flirtatious conversation for me. It can just be a conversation that takes my time from my wife. And a lot of times I've been defensive, yeah? Mm-hmm. And my wife is, and I'm paraphrasing, but my wife is like, why are you spending so much time on this? And it's not that, me, I put up my gloves already. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm not doing nothing. You know, I just, but the truth is my time was being invested in something else other than my wife. And so I'm learning, and I've learned over time to protect that. And even now, I got to be very conscious. Like, I could be literally checking things that are legitimate business on my phone, and I almost feel not guilty, but I have, because I feel like my wife is going to be like, and I don't know if you're joking, but what do you always say?
What you doing?
Or what else you say?
What you looking at?
What's the other one?
Huh?
Who are you talking to?
Oh, yeah. Who you talking to?
It's one of those three. What you doing? Who you talking? Who you talking to?
Well, and one of the things, like, if you're talking to your spouse, the worst thing you can do is pick up your phone
And throw them down.
and start looking at your phone, whether it's scrolling through Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or start having a conversation with somebody, and you're what? But I'm replying. Somebody's texting me. I gotta reply. No, you don't. This is the conversation that we're having. That can wait.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other topic in discussion, which is kind of outside of the marriage discussion, because that's a whole other. That's even a psychological problem for some people. If you cannot have an organic conversation with your spouse or anybody, and you got to pick up your phone and multitask,
That's an addiction.
yeah, that's a whole nother space, another discussion.
But like I said, your spouse still deserves your undivided attention. And if you're gonna go out to dinner, put your phone down, spend time with it's just your spouse or with your kids, or what you don't want to do is in the middle of a conversation you pick up your phone, and what does that say? Right? You're thinking, oh, I gotta answer this stuff right away. But what your spouse is thinking, wow, you don't care about me enough to listen to my conversation, or you don't care about our relationship enough. And it's not even just your spouse, it's your spouse, it's your kids, or it's whoever you are talking to. So now I feel like you're wasting my time. So I don't know, my husband, he said something last night. I was like, well, I don't like talking now because I feel like I'm wasting my breath.
Yeah. So, my wife and I were up at all kinds of hours. My wife she's literally working on her master's degree. Okay. But because we're doing it remotely, we have a life. So she's doing it in weird hours of the day, hours of the night. Okay. So we have a very weird sleep schedule. Time zones obviously come into play. So last night, was it 1:30? Almost 2:00. I'm already in bed, right? And she comes to bed and she's like, starts telling me this whole, well, I wake up for a minute, and I guess you felt I was wide awake.
No, you told me that you wasn't sleeping.
Oh, yeah.
You said, I'm not sleeping, I'm awake. I'm like, okay. Well, and then we start talking, and then next thing you know.
Okay, I gotta complete. Hold on. I wasn't sleeping. But I wasn't wide awake either. I was legitimately tired. And I was on my phone replying, right? When I heard the shuffling in the hallway, I put my phone down, and I wasn't trying to hide, but I was legitimately tired.
It looks like you were hiding.
So, but the point is, I rolled over in the bed. How many of you guys have done that? Like, I wanted to make like I was. So anyways, when you came in, I wasn't sleeping. I was tired though. So my wife said, oh, okay. So go ahead and finish your.
Yeah, so I was talking to him about a conversation that I had, because I picked up my phone and thinking, you know what, I shouldn't have picked up my phone. And I kept trying to get off the phone, but the conversation just kept going longer and longer. So finally I was like, yeah, for like the last 30 minutes. I think they finally caught the hint and said, okay. I just was calling to check. But I'm here talking to him and having a conversation. Then he starts snoring. I was like, you know what? I swear you said you was awake. And he said, oh, and then he said, now I'm awake. Well, let's have a conversation. No, I don't want to talk anymore. I feel like I'm wasting my breath.
So my wife would be talking, okay, family, and her voice was so soothing.
Yeah.
It was so soothing. It was beautiful. But and I was snoring. I'm not gonna lie. I was snoring in the middle of her talking, and
so you was sleeping.
No. See, I was snoring.
But you was awake.
Yeah, I was awake. That's possible. It's possible to snore while you're wide awake. Okay, maybe not wide awake, but I was listening. I was listening. Okay, but I wasn't reacting. Okay, maybe not. So my whole point, family. I don't know how we got so excited. What were we talking about? Oh my gosh, we're brain farting on our own conversation.
We were talking about having a conversation.
Oh, and
paying attention.
Yeah. So I know we kind of spent a lot of time on that. Let me read the scripture, and my wife get it. Here's one thing I want to share about my wife, and I hope that there's some value in here, family. I'll share the scripture in a second, but one of the things that we in our marriage that we understand is my wife, I know, was designed by God for me. That hands down, I know already. Yeah, beyond a shadow of it, I know that. And the funny thing is, my wife's favorite meal is prime rib. And anybody that knows scripture, you know, it's funny the way when we look at how God created the woman, it's not, he didn't use a foot, so the wife would be under me. He didn't use the head to where she would be, you know, over me, but literally the rib, right? So if you look at scripture, that God used a rib. So anyways, my wife has been by my side all this time. And that's one of the tough balances in our marriage, was understanding that she's not going to be behind me. She's not going to be in front of me. We're not going to be, you know, always at ends with each other. Everything we do, every single, even in the smallest decision, she can be going to Target and she sees something that that she wants to get. She'll text me and say, "Hey, what do you think?" Now, obviously, there are some things that are, you know, essentials and stuff. But if it's something like an office chair or something, or it could be like a desk or whatever, it could be anything. And she will text me, "Hey, what do you think?" And I'll say, "Yeah, it looks nice." You know, I said, "Well, just either buy it or have them, you know, have them ship it, whatever." You know, and so there's that understanding that everything we do it together. Our kids know that too. My kids know that they cannot manipulate mom and dad, even when it comes to leadership decisions. So whenever we have leadership discussions with our church leadership, it's always understood that my wife and I are going to be on the same page. That there is no, you know, there's no misunderstanding on that. Everything we do, and my wife has been by my side all these years in that respect. That comes, you know, even in business decisions. And I'm going to brag up on my wife, 'cause she had to step out for a second. My wife, we haven't changed the business filings yet, but she is going to be the CEO of our company. She doesn't need a degree, right, for that. But I firmly believe that even though with our job titles, our you can call it accreditations, I'm probably butchering the word, certifications, degree, whatever degrees, all that stuff. It doesn't matter in our marriage who has more of this and more of that. But everything we do side by side, hand in hand. Now she's so much better than I am when it comes to the back end of things, the paying of bills, all the I'm terrible at that stuff. But you put me on a stage in front of people, I will rattle day and night, all day long. You put me in front of a camera, whatever, I love it. I love that. If you ask me to come up with a schedule of stuff, Lord help us all, right? So I believe that my wife, with this whole idea and this dynamic of our marriage being side by side, at first, if you ever met us all those years ago, you would think, wow, these guys are weird. They're totally two different people. But it's so amazing how the pieces fit in our marriage. And what it stems from. And I'll share this concept. I've shared it in multiple leadership meetings, and we've done some coaching classes where we used to have a numerical order. So for those of you that are listening, I'm not sure if you have a numerical order of things of importance in your life. This is a very popular one that I hear in the church a lot. Number one is, okay, so number one in my life is God. My wife is number two. My children number three. My job is number four, or my business is number four. My boat is number five. My dog is actually, no, let me put my dog on number five. My mom and dad are numbers, whatever, right? We have a numerical order. And it does make sense. But one of the things that I adopted, someone showed this to me many years ago. I can't remember who it was. But he said, Greg, look at this circle. He drew this circle on his board. And in this circle, he wrote in big letters, G-O-D. He wrote God. And then on his big circle, he drew multiple circles on this whiteboard. And each circle represented a different thing, whether it was me, my wife, my children, business. It can even be everything from investments to schooling, you name it. And the closer those circles got to the big circle, which was represented as God, the more in unison those things, or in alignment those things would be with in our life with God. And the crazy thing is, the closer my relationship with the Lord was, and my wife's relationship with the Lord was, the tighter our marriage got. So rather than have a numerical system, we adopted this circle method, where God is the center of everything that we do. And if there's a new idea, or even on social media, and one of the things we pray about, it's like, hey, if we're going to do this. So we just started our Glow Sessions media company, and we did all the filings for it, right? The LLCs, we did all the GET tax license. So we made it. We even prayed about that, even as little as that is, to make sure all that is in alignment. And so with me and my wife, that's one of the things that we're learning, even in this stage of our marriage, that everything has to be in alignment with the Lord first. And being side by side, I was just telling them how you're my prime rib.
Well, I was thinking about this, about, Genesis, where it talks about being the helpmate, and what does it mean about being a helpmate for a wife, and, just thinking about marriage in general. And a lot of times, women get into marriages thinking that, okay, wow, our desire is to get married, right? But you're getting into marriage and you're thinking that your knight in shining armor is going to sweep you off your feet like a Cinderella movie. And then when you get married, there's something that happens. And what happens when you get married is you each become raw before each other, right? So now all your flaws are on display, right? It's like you standing naked before a mirror and you tossing like a ballerina, and your spouse is looking at you, right? And they can see every single flaw that you have on both spectrums, right? Whether you're the husband or the wife. And as a helpmate, as a wife, one of the responsibilities for us is to be a helpmate, right? So how can my husband succeed if I am the one who's bringing him down? How can my husband succeed if I am the quarrelsome wife, and if I'm not encouraging my husband to be the best husband that he can be? Well, and like I said, if you have a spouse who is stubborn, well, let's take that to God. Lord, show me how can I love on my husband in such a way that shows my husband that I really do love him. What words do I need to speak to my husband to show my husband that I really do love him? How do I behave? There was a girl recently who had passed away in Hawaii, and the husband had shot her in a car. And part of that, number one, jealousy. Number two is, how do I dress in such a way, or how do I treat my spouse in such a way, right? I don't want to dress provocatively outside of my home, to where, because I feel like I need attention, or think that it's okay to dress provocative, right? Like, I mean, and this is my opinion, provocativeness belongs in your bedroom, not outside on display for everybody to look at. Right? If I am the wife and my treasure belongs to my husband, then that's where my treasure should be, right? If
I was
am
going to
his,
ask you about that the other day, because I haven't shown my body on social media in a long time, and whatever I have on there now, that's old, so that's not really me anymore, right? That's not the real. It's not the real Greg Lopez. That's the old Greg Lopez.
well, this is what I've, my younger daughter that I teach her, my older one, this is what I've taught her to, on both spectrums, both on the medical side, right? As far as how we are built, how women are built, our design, and number two, how we should display ourselves before men. And one of the things I told her is, it's okay to enjoy God's creation, right? To think a man is handsome. That's one thing. When you move beyond that, and that becomes lust, that's a total different story. It's one thing to look at somebody and go, wow, they're pretty handsome. Right?
It's when you entertain the thought and take it further. And that's why I was going to ask you, I don't know if in private or maybe here today, but if someone, and this is a personal thing, it kind of bothers me a little bit, for someone to, okay, let me rewind. It doesn't necessarily bother me, but it does put up some red flags when I see a dynamic couple, quote unquote dynamic couple, both very attractive, and I don't mean it inappropriately, but like they have a good business, they take care of themselves, good stewards, but then either or, husband or wife, the way that they dress gets you to look at them in a way that can be lustful. Now, the way culture differences, I don't care what culture you're from, you cannot tell me when you show half of your breasts that it's not provocative. In any culture, that's provocative, unless you live in Africa where clothes are optional. But not okay. Let me say it like that. Not in Africa. What the heck? I mean, in those tribes. That's what I meant to say. There's certain tribes where they don't have those customs. So, anyways, I don't know how I got sideways. But my point being, it is a red flag for me as a husband that if my wife goes out of the house and she dresses in a way that she's showing the world cleavage, that is like cleavage for days, right? That's an issue. That's a red flag for me. And if I was to help steer anybody from unnecessary arguments or unnecessary feelings of maybe, like, I would be like, wait, why are you dressing? Like, who are you dressing for? Especially if I'm not with my wife. I mean, can you imagine what a husband would think? And maybe some husbands don't care. That's a whole other topic altogether. But if I love my wife and my spouse in such a way, I am not going to give you any doubt whatsoever that I love you and this body of mine, this is yours. Yeah, this belongs to you. And so I would encourage anybody in the room that's why I don't post any photos of me anymore without my shirt on, and it's not that, well, I'm probably not in a good season of my life physically right now, but there were times where I'd be okay sharing on social media those things. But at this stage, not anymore, But I want to share something, and in the area of protecting our marriage, there was a season in our marriage where, and I'm going to be very clear on this, I have never committed adultery on my wife with any other human being. I'll be very clear about that. However, I did have struggles with lustful thoughts and with pornography and those things, of looking at those things and entertaining those things. And I want to be clear that having issues with that undealt with will continue to place a wedge and cause your wife to feel that she's not good enough. That's the first initial anyway. Now, if it's going on for years and there's a calloused effect to it, it leads to other things, right? To bitterness. It'll lead to I don't know. My wife can name them all. Disgust. It can lead to like maybe just giving up on the intimacy part of the marriage at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But those are areas that as husbands we need to protect. And the link that I shared in a purple pill, I actually put in a Jumbotron. Victor Marx and his wife Eileen, one of the things they cover was protecting the intimacy of the marriage. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that comes with communication. And one of the things I share with my wife when it comes to lust or pornography, one of the triggers that I have or had and have, anytime there's a stressful situation, I think by nature, a lot of us will opt out for things that are not as hurtful or not as painful. We'll go for the easier route. At least we think it's an easier route, mm-hmm. rather than deal with the problem. And so in the area of drug addiction, for example, for those that are familiar with drug addiction, when you're dealing with, let's say, a problem with crystal meth or cocaine or even heroin, a lot of times people that give up those addictions, they have codependencies, things that they use to soothe that feeling or lack of, those addictive properties. That's not dealing with the actual issue in itself, right? So same thing when it comes to pornography. Pornography is not the problem or the issue primarily. It's really a level of intimacy that I felt that I was not comfortable sharing with my wife, or maybe I felt that I wasn't getting it. Now, this is just examples. And so I want to encourage the group or those listening that as a husband to protect that intimacy with your spouse. That my wife said something, I'm trying to figure out how we can share this part, but we're all adults here. My wife says, all you need is me, honey. There is nobody. And I'm gonna make it nice and pretty. My wife said, there is no replacement for me. I am your wife. And so I'll leave it at that. And it's true.
Because there's a false, it's not even reality.
It's fake.
It's fake.
And I'll share this part. For anybody that has issues with pornography, go to the Victor Marx. I shared it in a Jumbotron. If you're struggling with pornography, or not even pornography, just lust in itself, the truth about those types of things, and it's just women too, not just men, but one of the truths about consuming those things is that not only is it not real and it's fake, a lot of times those things that they put out there are very not just illegal. A lot of times you don't know the truth behind that industry in itself. And that's one of the things Victor Marx talks about. He actually had a guy who was in that industry for 20 years. Talked about the truth and the dark side. So not only are you being addicted or consuming something like that, but these are things that are very hurtful to women and men, not just women. And so going back to it's not fake, right?
Intimacy with your spouse is not fake. It's real.
Well, I'm talking about the pornography is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you said it's not fake.
Yeah, so the pornography that it's not real, right?
Yeah.
And so there is nothing like a legitimate, rejuvenated, invigorating intimacy with your spouse.
And the other thing, be honest with your spouse, right? Don't and the spouse, as a woman, as a helpmate, it's my job as a helpmate, right, to help my husband with whatever struggles he's going through. Now, if I am that quarrelsome wife, how can I help my husband in that, right? Like, create a space to talk. Let's have a conversation about this and why, and what are the triggers, right? So that we can help you move on from whatever issue it is. Right? Let's talk about this as a spouse. Let's talk about this. Let's have a healthy conversation about this. Because one of the lies that as a spouse, you tell yourself is, yeah, I don't need to talk about this. It's just a man thing. It's just a woman's thing.
He'll figure it out on his own.
Right.
Yeah, he'll figure it out. Because he's a good man. Right? He loves the Lord. He'll repent. Right? He'll fix it. Him and God got this. Don't worry, they got it. That's the worst.
Yeah.
It really is.
Or to become quarrelsome, or when somebody is becoming vulnerable before you, or they're talking about something that hurts them or is shameful to them, the worst thing that you can do is treat them like crap.
Yep.
In the struggle,
especially in a marriage situation.
mm-hmm.
For me, because you are the only person that is allowed to hurt me. Nobody else. And I'm speaking that, and I'm being proud about that. Nobody has access to my armor except for you.
In the same way, nobody has access to my heart except you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm.
So if my own wife is not supporting me, that's like she's literally taking a knife and just sticking it in my leg. And now I got to walk with that. The hard part is, if I'm going to be open with my wife, that means I got to be willing to give her access. We had I had a podcast with Dr. Heath, who was in here. We talked about, he talked about being vulnerable and how that's not really, he didn't say it's not a good word, but there's other terminologies to use. So I'm not necessarily vulnerable to my wife, but she has access to me underneath the armor. Not because I want her to hurt me, but because we're doing this together.
Well, and as a spouse, we should be each other's biggest cheerleaders, right? Even in the struggle, even when you're walking through such a hard place in life, right? You should always be supportive. Now, I said this the other day. I don't know who was saying it to, and they said, I'm not saying that I'm supporting you through the struggle of, I don't know, alcoholism or pornography or whatever, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's okay, right? But I'm supporting you in such a way where we're having a conversation about this and how can we make things better, right? How can we move past the addiction? And a lot of times the addictions is because it's undealt with issues in our life, right?
Yep.
And really, I mean, I've dealt with addiction, and that's because a lot of times we don't know how to deal with issues. And if you've never been taught how to deal with issues, if you've come from a place of abuse, you've come from a place of trauma, getting help is a good place to start.
Yep.
Right? Getting counseling, allowing another voice to come inside and from a different perspective. And it's not from a personalized perspective, but an outside perspective that can give you some help into where you are at, because you don't want to stay there and you don't want to be stuck there. And a lot of times we fear counseling. We fear getting counseled by somebody else because we don't want to feel like we were made to be crazy, or oh my God, because this is the stigma. Oh my God, if I gotta get counseling, that means I'm a crazy person
or not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you from a husband's perspective, I'm not going to let some guy come in here or some woman tell me how to run my marriage, because I got this. I'm the husband. No. This is my wife. I'm not going to let somebody I don't know tell me how to fix this. I don't even know you. Remember, we used to have those arguments like, no, I'm not going to go to some random person and have them pull out their degrees and I think we kind of talked. Well, I'll go to my uncle Adrian, who was a licensed. He was a clinical psychologist, or
And
Even
it's not
Terry.
them, right? Because it's not them telling you what to do. It's them giving you options and helping you to see things differently. Because I went to counseling. I actually had a counselor because I had postpartum depression after I had my son and wanted to drive myself off the freeway, which is the H3 in Hawaii, which is over a mountain. So if I drove myself off the freeway, I would be in the mountain. Right. But I knew that there was something going on psychologically. And I couldn't understand what was going on until I went back to the doctor when my son was born. He had to do his checkups. And then they told me that I needed to go and see a counselor for postpartum depression. And so when I went to see the counselor, it's amazing what you see differently, right? And I love Christians. Sometimes from a Christian perspective, their perspective is skewed when it comes to counseling. And so what I've been taught was that you shouldn't go and see a counselor because you're going to open yourself up to the enemy and all these things is going to come into your life and, just a whole bunch of nonsense. That's not true. But when I went to see this counselor, she gave me insight into a lot of things. And what I would do is the advice that she gave me is things that I would take and I would pray. I would pray about it and I would ask the Lord about it. And some of the things had to do with trauma, and so when it's good to get counseling when you're addicted to something, whether it's pornography, whether it's lust, whether it's drugs, because there's an underlying issue that you got to get to the root. And it's only when you deal with the root of the issue do things really move and go away. A lot of times we put blinders on and walk through life like as if it's gonna go away, right? But the elephant is still in the room every time you enter the room, and it never goes away until you deal with it.
Not just in the room, you're on the elephant. you're literally riding the elephant. It's like, what the heck?
But I learned a lot of things through counseling. Number one, that it's not wrong to get counseling. Number two, sometimes it's good to get an outside perspective of things. And number three, it can help you pray for
effectively. Yeah.
And get to the root of the issues.
How many times in our marriage can you think of where it was at that point where we could have gotten a divorce?
Maybe like 3 times.
That's the same number I was thinking.
Yeah. I remember we were fighting. And then you went home to your parents, you remember?
Yeah.
You back up. And you went home. And I know part of that reason is, like I said, when I would get angry, I would say things rashly. I could be very crass. I could be very crass with my words when I'm angry and I feel like you're hurting me. I remember saying, and I couldn't take it back after it came out of my mouth.
I don't remember. Go ahead.
And I said, you know what? Just take this ring and give him to your mom. You should marry her.
I don't remember that.
And I remember saying it and I was like, I couldn't take it back.
I don't remember that.
And you were so mad at me. I was quiet after that because I didn't know what to I didn't know what to well, not that I didn't know what to say, but I already knew that I made a mistake in what I said.
I don't remember that at all.
But I was so angry at that point. And that's the Lord had taught me over the years to just shut up and not say anything, because what you're gonna say can stab somebody in the heart with it.
I do remember staying at my parents' house and how hurt I was.
Yeah.
I remember that feeling, although I wasn't acting like it.
I said some pretty mean things.
Well,
like I said,
family, just so you know, we went through one tissue box already. Just so you guys know, we're being pretty We're having our own therapy today.
You know, the Bible talks about being careful with your words, yeah, in the things that we say, because some of the things that we do say, when you, especially if you're a spouse, right? You know the things that can hurt your spouse, and in your heart hurt because you're hurt, right? Hurting people hurt people. You don't want to hurt them, but you want to make it better. So sometimes it's better to just be silent. How many times have I been silent in our marriage?
And honestly, family, that drives me crazy. If I cannot get a response from my wife verbally, that drives me nuts. And it's so ironic because as a kid, the famous story was I didn't talk until I was 5 years old. Now you can't get me to shut up. So, but I don't know if you remember this part, honey, where I can't even remember the context. I know we were bad at this one point. You were in the kitchen cutting something. Do you remember this?
I don't know.
We were fighting. I remember, and to this day, I don't even know why I did it. I think it was more for control. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm thinking. But I grabbed your hand while you were cutting vegetables, and your hand was on the knife. You don't remember that, do you? Mm-mm. And I stopped you from cutting the vegetables. And to this day, I don't even know my thought process. I just know that I did it as a way to get you to stop. Because you weren't talking or you weren't listening, whatever it was. Mm. And I grabbed the knife and I made you stop cutting those vegetables. And now that, I don't know how many years ago that was, but I'm thinking, I'm glad that we were grounded in the Lord, even though we were fighting, right? Mm-hmm. Because had we have been in a different space, had we been different people, not grounded in the Word, not grounded in the Lord, and not having a relationship, even though my relationship with the Lord was very poor at that time. But can you imagine if we weren't in a good place? Like, what are you doing grabbing this knife on my hand, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, just who knows? And that's an attribute to the grace of God in our marriage and how, even though we may be distant from one another, mm-hmm. It goes back to what I said earlier, that if this big circle where I put God, and the closer that I get to Him, mm-hmm. You may be far away, you may be close, but I just know that the tighter that bond is, it'll not just preserve our marriage, but make it fruitful, make it enjoyable and vibrant and full of life.
I think sometimes silence prevents you from saying things that is more hurtful or adding fuel to the fire. Yeah? Silence stops you from adding fuel to the fire of where you're at. And sometimes we just gotta stop, walk away, and then come back together again. Right? So the Bible talks about do not let the sun go down on your wrath. Basically, don't go to bed angry. But sometimes you gotta go to bed or go to one corner and like ding ding ding. And it's round two.
It's okay to kind of make up before you go to bed and still not have a resolution. That's okay. If I was to give any advice in that area, is make up with your spouse before you go to bed and just say, I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't know what the best way to overcome this, but I just know that I love you.
And actively listen, not just listen to have a response, right? Or I'm not quite paying attention to what you're saying. I'm hearing you, but I'm not quite paying attention to what you're saying because I got a response and I just got to say, growing up, my parents would fight, and when they would fight, they would get really, really loud. And being the youngest, sometimes I was stuck in the middle, and I would be the one being pulled apart, going back and forth. But I'm standing there in the middle of them, and I'm just looking at the both of them, and they're shouting louder because they're not listening to each other. So what they're trying to do is talk over the other one because they like the other one hear what they're saying, but they're not actually listening. So they think by shouting louder that the other person is actually going to listen to what they're saying. But really, they're both not listening. They just want to get a point across. And they're like, but you're not listening to me. But they're both not listening to each other.
John Maxwell has a great teaching series on this. So if anybody knows who John Maxwell is, he's a business motivational speaker. He's very wealthy from all of that. But one of the things he teaches is about listening. And if you can learn to cultivate a way of listening, truly actively listening, which means you take that pen that is scribbling notes in your brain while the other person is talking, take that pen, throw it away. Stop trying to come up with a response while that person is speaking. If you can master that art and you just truly listen, if you have to scribble any notes in your brain, scribble down what they're saying rather than come up with a response. And that's one of the things John Maxwell teaches, which is a great method of being an effective listener. And I still struggle with that today. My wife is like, are you paying attention? Because she'll hear clacking, or she'll hear mouse clicks, or she'll see that my eyes are focused in a different direction. So in the area of listening, I would encourage that. That's a great lesson from John Maxwell, is to stop coming up with a response while your spouse is talking.
I want to say that, if you're in a struggle right now, active listening is a good way. Practicing active listening is a good way to help your marriage, right? So when your spouse is talking, or because they're angry or hurt or whatever, actively listening to what they're saying can help you understand why they are hurt, why they are mad, because that will help you deal with the problem, right? And it's not, and listening in such a way of not taking it like they're pointing fingers at you, or like you got to be defensive, right? Because you shouldn't have to be defensive against your spouse. It's a learning process. Marriage is always a learning process of learning how to love my spouse better, right?
Am I defensive?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Less than before.
A lot less than before?
A lot less than before.
You know what that is? It's a personal problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really with you. I would say that part of that is pride. Not in a way like, oh, I'm the best. It's just a pride of like, no, I know what I'm talking about. I can do this.
So when your spouse is defensive, it's hard to address issues.
Yeah. Because
when they're defensive, it's like, oh my God. And if you have any personality like mine, like, oh my God, I don't want to sit here arguing with you.
I'll sit there argue all night.
Yeah. And I'm like, just shut up already. I don't want to argue with you. And sometimes in the argument, and there were several times where we were arguing, I stopped talking and I got so angry, and I was asking the Lord, I need you to help me, because I like stab him with my words right now. And the only thing that I could say is, sometimes you just don't know when to be quiet.
Yeah. I've heard that.
And it wasn't like, I didn't say, honey, sometimes you just don't know it. No, sometimes you just don't know when to be quiet.
Yeah.
And then I'll get up and I'll walk away. And then you'll become quiet.
Hey, let me tell you, that's some gold nuggets right there. Free of charge, bro. Free of charge. Hey, let me tell you this, family. One of the coolest things that I learned from my wife was going through her journals. I learned a lot about myself by reading my wife's journals, because she would say, and I'm gonna make this into a joke, okay? Because it's very personal, but she would write stuff in there. You know what, God? You gotta do something with this guy, because I don't know, he's acting up. He's not doing what he's supposed to. He's not being the man of God he's supposed to. So can you talk to him? And I'm paraphrasing, and I'm making light of it. It is a very personal thing of my wife's, but that's one of the things I will say that even helped me in this chapter of my marriage was starting to journal personal things, not just ideas or business things, but to jot down personal things of how I felt, and to have this conversation with the Lord, and not just things that like, hey, Lord, I need help with this, or I need help. It's more like just being grateful. I say, God, thank you for my wife, man. And to this day, my wife and I, can we share any of those, or are those very personal, those declarations? You like grab one? Oh, I'll grab one in a second. So every morning, my wife and I, we have these declarations we make over ourselves, over our kids, over our business, our ministry. So part of the things that we are we've been given stewardship over, other than being pastors, is that we are actually we call it, we're prayer leaders over the state of Hawaii. And so part of our duties is to connect with leadership in the state of Hawaii, whether it's pastors or could be any type of leader, in Hawaii, that are on the same page in the area of praying for the state in what we call the seven mountains, or seven realms of influence, which covers I gotta write this down so I don't miss it. It covers government, education. Well, I won't say them all, but government, education, religion. So, anyways, all those duties, things that we are given stewardship over, we pray over those things as a couple. Every morning, that's what we do. But one thing that really enhanced my my outlook on my wife was doing what she was doing to me. Yeah, I would write, say, God, this woman, wow, you gotta do something with this woman. God, she's driving me nuts. And that only happened one day where I wrote that out. And actually, it wasn't even about her. It was just, yes, God, I don't know what to do anymore. And if you look at my journal, it's all smeared on one page because I was crying. Like this was my intimacy with the Lord on this journal, on this paper. I said, Lord, I don't know what to do. And so that really helped me articulate really what was in my heart, because I'm not someone that is willing to really have those conversations. Yeah, I'm not that guy. Yeah, that's not my genetic makeup, really.
Yeah, but that's changing
in a good way.
Yeah. Like I said, the same thing that I said about Jasmine, the things that are uncomfortable, because this is what I've never had. In the same way, when you're dealing with a spouse, when you're in marriage, you have to learn how to overcome some of those things. And like I said, if you cannot overcome that on your own, go get counseling to help you overcome those things, because in your marriage, you got to fight for it. And this is one of the things that the Lord told me a while back. And he said to me, if you do not fight for your marriage, nobody will.
Actually, there's a lot of people trying to destroy your marriage. Mm-hmm. I can't even tell you how many countless times, and they're small. They're in Hawaii, we say manini, which is, tiny, but they're still there. And I'll share this on Twitter, on X, for example. I made a post on Twitter, on X, that in the past 8 months, I have gotten more spam bot DMs, sex bot DMs in 8 months than I've gotten in the last 15 years on Facebook. It's unbelievable how many sex bots are sending me DMs every single day. And I don't even read them, right? But I'm like, it's all the same. It got so bad where it's, hey, my sister saw your profile and she wants to connect with you. Click here. And it got to the point where, like, wow, this is crazy every day. So if nobody's going to fight for your marriage, if you don't fight for your marriage, nobody will. Mm-hmm. But there's people coming out here to actually destroy you, mm-hmm. even in the smallest forms of just social media in itself. We're not even talking about other things. So there's so much that, even statistically speaking, I can't remember the number because I talked about it in one of my podcasts. Was, I forget who it was with. Oh my gosh! Oh, it was Papa Bear, Alaska. It's bad. We're talking about 50% minimum end up in divorce.
we can pray for our daughter. Our oldest daughter's married now, and we can pray for her. We can pray for her marriage. But if they both don't fight for it,
Yep.
nobody's gonna fight for it like only they can. You got to fight for what you want, right? You got to fight to stay together. You got to fight the issues that come, right? So I have 4 biological brothers, and then I have Hanai brothers, which is basically don't know.
Family adopted, basically. They're family, but
it's
they're-
hard to
yeah.
explain what Hanai is. I'm not going to explain that in this space, but I have a whole bunch of them. And one of the things they said to me was, when you're a man and you are dealing with he said when you're a man and you're dealing with a woman, one of the things that you deal with when you're in a relationship is you deal with pornography, you deal with other people, right? That's can be whatever sexual relationships, so basically sex outside of marriage, right? And then when you're married, you still gonna deal with pornography, and then now you're dealing with infidelity, right? Now you're dealing with adultery. It's the same thing, but it's on 2 different planes, because one you're not married, and then the other one you are married, right? So now when you're married, you're tethered together with your spouse, and that means it's more of a heartbreak, an emotional tie for both of you, right? It's a covenant. It's not a contract. It's a covenant that you make, together, saying that we are one. We're gonna work this thing out, and we're gonna make it work no matter what, right? So it's that no matter what, that's the part that you're fighting for. It's the no matter what happens, this is what we're fighting to stay together, right? We're fighting for our kids, because not just in a marriage are you fighting for the both of you, but you got to fight for your kids too at the same time. I had a friend growing up, and he was a really good friend, and then all of a sudden things changed. He started acting out. He would have problems. I mean, he fight all the time, and he went from being an A student all the way down to an F. And later on, I found out that it was his parents was having a hard time, and they were talking about divorce. And if we think that it's only your spouse that you're affecting, no, you affect your kids too, and you affect the way the kids react, how they see you. It's hurtful to them, so like I said, it's it's a whole lot of things. I'm glad I have a whole bunch of brothers talk to you about a lot of things. And that's before we even got married, this is all the conversations that I had with them before I got married. And even when I did get married, there is boundaries, and majority of my family understand the boundaries. They walk in those boundaries. They understand the boundaries of being married. My husband is off limits, right? It's not my brother's not gonna come over there and beef with my husband, right? Or try to beat him up or whatever. No, it's a different story if there's abuse going on. But I think
and to be clear,
myself.
yeah, to be clear, in our marriage, we have never gotten physical with each other.
Nor have we ever swore at each other, nor do we call each other names.
Not once, yeah. We've never swore at each other.
No. Now my mom and them used to swear at each other, but my parents never called each other names.
Yeah. And we've never gotten physical.
No. But culturally, I've seen that happen in a lot of Hawaiian families. It's a prevalent thing.
Now, speaking about culturally now, one thing is guaranteed: if I ever got physical,
My whole family
we
would
could
be after
expect
you.
an entire entourage. I mean, there's no question.
Yeah.
There is no debate.
Yeah.
And here's the funny thing: it doesn't matter in Hawaii. It doesn't matter if you have a family that is healthy or jacked up, whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah. If
To my family.
in any family in general, you can pretty much expect the entire entourage, uncles and aunties, gonna come. Right? It's not just the men. You're talking about uncles, aunties, all gonna come and they're gonna regulate. Right? Even if it's none of their business, right? But it is their business. Right? And that's just a mentality. And I'm just grateful that we never ever even got close to that. I'm blessed, and I'm so honored to have to say that we
I
have.
think we had enough respect for each other. And, you know, we didn't just jump into marriage. We built our relationship. It wasn't about sex. It was about legitimately having a relationship.
Yeah. And we didn't meet in a nightclub.
No.
Not that saying you can't find your significant other, you know. We didn't meet on singles.com or you know, hot male bride or hot whatever. It was in church. That's where we met. So I think we're at that 2-hour mark. So I think this is a good place to get close. We're going to have to continue obviously with part 4. And I know we didn't talk about what do you do if you already split, right? Or separate. We talked a little bit about separation, but not really in a. I know there's a lot of people that that I've come across that are not with their spouse anymore. Either they're divorced or they're in a process of getting a divorce, and so I know that's a whole other dynamic. And I do believe, even with what we share, that can still give people a good roadmap to saving a marriage.
Fight for it.
Fight for it. Now, I will say this: if that's who God called you to be with, I can think of 2 people right now that I know of that got a divorce and got married again. Public figures, as a matter of fact. One is Ron Carpenter Jr.
He remarried.
He remarried. He got a and it was very public.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's another one I can't think of right, but that was one of the big ones that I know of, that God restored him and restored her first, and then restored their marriage.
Benny Hinn too.
Benny Hinn, yeah. Yeah,
He remarried his wife.
That's so funny. So we know that, and that leads into another topic, which I think we'll talk about next, and the next is about forgiveness. Yeah, I think you think that's a good forgiveness.
Yeah, you gotta have thick skin.
And be willing to forgive.
Yeah. If you want to make it work, if you want it to work, yes, right. If I am your helpmate, I choose to forgive, but my feelings gotta catch up. It's a choice that you make.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think we'll talk about that in our next episode.
But
forgiveness, I think that's a good.
I don't know if I had shared this. I had pulled it up.
Well, while you're looking for that, I'll share a scripture that I want to share earlier, and this is more of an encouragement, and it's out of Mark chapter 10. And my wife has shared with us on multiple social media accounts before, but it says that out of Mark chapter 10 and verses 6 through 9, it says that, but from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. Therefore, a man will leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. And the other scripture I'll share, and I'll turn it to my wife, is that, and this is more of an encouragement, and for anybody that maybe you're going through a struggle, maybe you don't know what the next step is in your relationship, in your marriage, is that in Romans 8:20, it says that we know that in all things that God works for the good of those that love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And I think that's a good lead into what we're going to talk about in our next episode is in the area of forgiveness. If we know, that we are called, whether it's in a marriage, that everything we do, that he desires the best for us in our marriage. And part of that, and we'll talk about it in more in depth in the area of forgiveness, is that's understanding and being humbled by the fact that first and foremost, I was forgiven first. And if I cannot have that same grace for you as my wife, who am I to say that? Like, you know what I mean? That's not a good place to operate from. So I'll turn to my wife and then we'll land the plane.
First Peter 3:7. It's funny that you said that. First Peter 3:7 says, husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as a weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. You know that your prayers will be hindered if you don't treat your wife right. But it says to be considerate, right? So be considerate as you live with your wife, right? We talked about that. We talked about, don't sit in spaces, consume spaces that you shouldn't be in. Keep your presence to a minimum. If there's somebody else there of the opposite sex, right? Let's not, be in alone with somebody in that space. Make sure that, you're transparent with everything, all your social media accounts, and being transparent with just different things, right? Money, whatever it is, right? Treating them with respect, right? Pornography is not treating your wife with respect. It's not when you're looking at pornography, it's how are you seeing your spouse, right? And that was one of my things. Like, are you looking at me? Are you looking at them? Like, what are you thinking about in your head? Or when you're out, right? And you looking at another woman, right? What are you looking at? Are you not willing to look your wife in the same way, right? And one of the things that I don't know, they would always have this women crush Wednesdays. I don't know if that was on Facebook, Instagram, something like that. Okay. So somebody had asked me a question. Well, several people at different times. And one of these ladies had asked me something, and her husband was right there. And she said, well, what do you think about him? Isn't he handsome? I said, well, I tell you what I think. I think my husband is handsome. I don't look at men in that way. So I cannot give you an answer to that. And I trip because they have Women Crush Wednesdays and they have Men Crush Mondays, and I see all these people posting all this stuff, and it boggles my mind to think that, why would you think that that's okay if you are married? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, why are you thinking of them in that way? Like, my husband is my crush.
For life.
Period.
No
one else. I don't see anybody else in that way. As a wife, that's how you should be seeing your husband. As a husband, that's how you should be seeing your wife. It's not longing for something else. It's not longing for my spouse to look a certain way, because I think this model is hot, or this actor is hot, So funny because people ask me about Jason Momoa. I was like, that's not my cup of tea. He's not my spouse, and I don't care. I just, treat your husband with respect. Treat your wife with respect. That's what First Peter 3:7 talks about. Treating your wife with respect. Remember that your wife is your heir with you of the gracious gift of life. We share life together. We are a gift to each other, and that's how we should be living in that way and in that manner. And if you don't want your prayers to be hindered, husbands, Be considerate to your wife.
Well, family, want to thank you for listening. And those of you in the Spotify, Apple podcast, thank you for hanging out with us. And those of you in our Twitter live, X Spaces live, thank you for being here. We're going to continue. Obviously, we can't continue or cover everything that we had put in our notes, but there's so much. And, you know, when we have these organic conversations with me, and I love this. And so pray for us, because we're part of our vision board is getting a studio space, probably a warehouse space, and set up a whole multimedia studio, obviously a ministry center here in Oregon. We have our dreams of our property in Hawaii to do something like that too. But while we're here, and office space is very cheap here. So, you know, like $1 a square foot, that's crazy cheap. So that's one of the dreams, having a center, multimedia, social media, content creation. And so I'll say this, family, keep us in prayer, because we're believing that God's going to open doors for us to have a center where people can come when they visit Central Oregon. Hey, we'll pick you up. Let's hang out for a minute. Let's do a podcast. We'll do some, you know, seminars. We'll do some content creation meetups, whatever. So that's what's on the horizon for us. We're believing for God to open those doors. And so we're excited for that. We've already gotten, my wife is working on a business plan, the ideas and how we're going to make it work and how it's going to happen. And we've got a great team of people actually to support us in that area, in the business side of it all. So keep that in your horizon and look forward to that. I've taken a cue from a lot of people that are doing it in the popular culture area, like Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, those guys. I respect that model of what they're doing. So I believe we need more kingdom-minded people doing it the same as well. So thank you for everybody that is listening on replay and those that are in the live. I see Dr. Heath. Thank you. And thank you to I'm going to mention his name, Aurelio. Thank you for hanging out for the entire time. He had to step out. And also thank you for that very kind message you sent to me in DM. I really appreciate that. Truly heartfelt. On behalf of my wife and myself, we want to thank you for being here, for giving us your time above everything else you gave. Thank you for your time above everything else. My name is Brother Greg, aka The Real Gilo. If you want to connect with me or my wife, links are all in the bio, or go to therealgilo.com. All the resources are there. And we thank you so much for your support. So, as I always say, love you guys. God bless you guys. Hui ho, aloha e mahalo. Yes, sir. Chihu.
Every day like this, it's a brand new day.